Okay, guys. Yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you, Alan, Zach, for putting things together and allowing us to discuss fluctuating selection in nature. I mostly do computing stuff, uh, networks in ecology and evolution to understand biodiversity patterns. This talk today, I'm trying to put a few things together. Maybe some are out of the blue, but I'm trying my best to compose and put different levels of organization in the same, in the same framework. So this is a teamwork. Many people, different parts of the world, are contributing. So I think we are in a fascinating moment in science. We are really advancing in many fields, in many disciplines. For example, here you can see like A, B, C, D, like gene networks or the pleiotropy mutational matrix, right? Polygenic, driving polygenic traits. Then in B, you have a population interactions, can be mating interactions, competitive cooperation interactions. C, you have a meta population, so B is part of C. You see this is nested, is growing towards right? Food webs, which is D. You have the bottom is the primary producers, and you go up different trophic levels. So there are many people working in each of these different fields, A, B, C, D, but much less number of people, scientists, working in E, F, G, and H. So the transitions, right, in between these fields. These are kind of hybrid scientists, but science, we are pulling things together. We're building amazing data sets, and we hope, right, that this kind of synthesis that is currently happening can give us a much better understanding of the multi-layered networks, right, and how biodiversity emerges consequence of the interacting layers. We can use many approaches here. One is just universal, right? Level is predicting all the other levels from the bottom to the top, or vice versa, but we are still, right, pretty far from really understanding well these multi-layer networks. So this is my kind of vision about right, the state of the art of this problem of understanding biodiversity, putting together many different, right, spatial scales and biological levels. So I really want to quickly go through classical biodiversity patterns, the latitudinal gradient, right? Many studies, many patterns, mostly from biogeography point of view, some from ecology, I think less from evolution point of view. So the point here is don't have a good understanding of the mechanisms, right, that produce this pattern. We know this is a contemporary pattern, but if you go backward in time, this pattern has been highly variable. You don't have this indeed gradient pattern, and there are many potential, right, mechanisms that have been driving these gradients. For example, plate tectonics, abiotic factors, different environmental factors, different biotic factors. So there are many branches that we need to put together to understand these patterns. And so multi-layer networks can be one of the frameworks, right, to be used to understand process-based latitudinal gradients of biodiversity. As we all know, biodiversity is declining at high rates, is highly heterogeneous in many different parts of the world. So really we don't know the mechanism producing, right, these gradients. We know even less, right, how fast biodiversity will be declining depending on how the different levels interact. And this can be, I think, visualized, much better here. In panel A, you can see more or less most of the approaches today, they deal with just specific levels, and they are independent. You have like genes, traits, populations, communities. So there are many people working, right, within of these, each of these levels. Panel B shows more or less how we are trying to deal with understanding biodiversity, which is connecting polygenic traits, right, with, I'm sorry guys, I'm trying to, with population dynamics, and then how to scale from population dynamics to community dynamics. So the interactions between the different levels in different directions is what makes this approach potentially useful. I'm going to now go through a couple of examples. This is a recent paper published in Nature by an international team where they show you have like 3 axes here, the sampling time, the interaction strength, right, and the pairwise interactions among many species. And as you can see, for some species, interactions are positive, so they really are more kind of mutualistic interactions. For other species, they are negative, so you have antagonistic interactions. But there's a common pattern here, which is the interaction strength fluctuates over time for all the pairwise interactions. This is pretty amazing. If you take a look at the food web ecological networks discipline, most approaches deal just with constant interaction strengths and stability analysis in such a scenario. So stability conditions, right, biotic and abiotic, but the data is now coming and from different branches, and it's clearly showing that fluctuating interaction selection is happening. Now the point is, what are the drivers? These are biotic or abiotic drivers? Here I'm going to challenge a bit that abiotic and biotic drivers can be happening simultaneously. We still don't have a framework for that, but we, for example, here we can see that, let's say you have a panel A, you have different genotypes, different architectures producing different traits, you have distributions, and then in panel B you have a classical, right? You have, let's say, a pleiotropic matrix with different degrees of epistasis producing distributions with different variances. And then panel C, what you have is the same. Let's say on the left you have the prey, and on your right you have the predators, and these are 2 distributions. But this is for 2 species, but you have 2 distributions for many interacting species. So we don't have a framework to understand, right, how 2 distributions, right, for 2, but for many pairwise interacting species drive community dynamics and biodiversity patterns. One potential approach is that assuming that predators, they have different preferences, so they not always prefer the mean prey, the mean resource. And this can be visualized better here on top, panel A. You have traditions in the x-axis, meaning that predators can prefer the most common, right, the most rare on the left of the distribution of the resources, or the most rare in the right side. So you have different potential options, and this is mostly because different preferences, energy requirements, right? The point here is that depending on the preference of the predator, you have different interaction strengths. And we are discussing here for a specific phenotype of a predator. So in the equation at the bottom, what you can see essentially is the classical stabilizing selection dynamics between interacting phenotypes of prey and predators, but with a second term, and the second term is essentially the asymmetry in the preference. So predators can prefer, right, common preys, then we are in the standard model, right, in the mean field model. But if predators prefer rare preys from different parts of the distribution, then what you have is what you see on the panel A, right? The preference is going to be towards more or less straight distance. And this is important to predict interaction strength. So the main point here is that we can calculate the interaction strength depending on predator preference and the asymmetric predator preference. And this essentially, going backwards, can tell you that beyond abiotic seasonality or other potential abiotic, right, factors driving the fluctuations in interaction strength, you can also have biotic interactions, right, pairwise interactions, driving the fluctuations, interaction strength, and the stability of large communities. So this is one of the potential ways of connecting, right, biotic selection to the stability of ecological networks for a large number of species. We can put this in a more broader context. So we have been working with antagonistic fluctuating selection in networks. Essentially here you have on the bottom the, let's say, victims or resources, and the top you have antagonistic, consumers or exploiters. And now for each, the nodes here is the density. It's just a cartoon to illustrate, right, to visualize how are we trying to understand fluctuating interaction selection in networks. The point is that you have one trait here is the interaction trait, right, for the resources, and one for the consumers. And what we want to understand is how, this is a matching trait model, so how trait dynamics drive, the evolution of trait dynamics drive population dynamics and the stability of these networks. So on top you can see the dynamics of the victims, the dynamics of the exploiters. You can see that essentially the growth rate, right, and the interaction strength is function in the center of the slide. You can see is function of a trait matching model, right? So you are a consumer, in this case an exploiter, that you are close to the mean, right, of all the victims. You are going to increase your fitness, and you are going to be tracking them and increasing the fitness. As you can see also here in the right part, the growth rates function the abiotic, right, stressor, which is we are using the same trait for the biotic and the abiotic. This is like it's a highly integrated phenotype. I'm gonna go later with right, exploring modularity, right, in different traits, and this is maybe one way to deal with fluctuating selection, accounting for biotic and abiotic traits. But in this scenario, both traits are integrated, are responding the same way. The mean trait values for each species can be calculated using classical gradient analysis. And so essentially, if you are pretty close, right, to the optimum, you are going to increase fitness. The phi term, the second term, is going to tell you how, right, fast you approximate to the optimum. And so you can run many generations and explore the dynamics of these antagonistic networks. So in the left side, you see in the x-axis the mean abundance, and the y-axis abundance variance for 40 scenarios. And both weaks, meaning biotic and abiotic stressors are weak, so we are in a neutral scenario. We have just drift. So the traits really, they don't matter, it's just population drift. And then you can have interaction, right? Selection is stronger than abiotic selection, the opposite scenario, and then the two are strong, really strong selecting agents. And what you can see is that in the three scenarios, when you don't have the orange scenario with strong interaction strength, what you have essentially is an stabilizing variance in the abundances of all populations in victims and exploiters. And when you have in one of the other three scenarios, you have a correlating, right, mean and variance in abundance. Essentially, this means that when interaction selection is really strong, this acts as highly stabilizing, right, selecting agents, keeping all species coexisting. On the right side of this panel, you can see the same, but for the traits. And what we are seeing here is that when you have a strong interaction selection, the traits are really variable, and the turnover is pretty high, despite its interactions are strong. This essentially means the following. This means that we can calculate in these models the interaction fluctuating selection variance. It's essentially right, how the interaction strength between each pair of species across all the network is fluctuating in time. And so you plot the mean versus the variance of fluctuating selection. You see that when interaction strength is really strong, the traits, right, the turnover, the variance is really, really high. And so this essentially is telling us that we can have many strong interactions. And despite so, the communities are highly stable because the traits, right, the turnover is so high, right, that you can keep interactions really strong. And as you have been thinking a bit of food webs or following the literature, the accepted standard is that when you have strong interactions, communities are unstable. But essentially here, the point is when you have eco-evo, right, feedbacks, the interactions can be strong, but because turnover in trait dynamics, the network is highly stable and all species can coexist. But till now, I would like to make a shift and self-criticize a bit. In food webs, most publications, most studies are still dealing with one trait, interaction trait. The point is how to combine many different traits, like traits responding not only to interactions, trophic, whatever the kind of interaction you are interested in, but also abiotic factors or other kind of factors. And this is where the thing, for example here, just a cartoon, right? If you have a lot of overlapping, right, in the interaction trait, but then you can have strong competition and the distribution of a string can, if you have, for example, abiotic factors coming into play, you have many extinctions. This is just the visual, right, so we had to deal with abiotic traits and see how biotic and abiotic traits, right, together respond to the stability of complex networks. So we are starting here. This is, I think, relates a bit with the previous talks. So you have on the x-axis spatial scale, meters, y-axis temporal scale. You have essentially seasonality, right? Spatial scale, the blue things on the right, and broad temporal scale, your tides, planetary waves. You have seasonal cycles. You have different kind of the Milankovitch cycles that dominate the glacier, right? Interglacier periods. We don't have a good understanding, right, of these seasonal fluctuations with different amplitude and frequency on populations or on communities. And so the point is how to put these things in the context of biotic interactions. And we are now dealing with a model to account for trait architecture and biodiversity dynamics. Quickly imagine a spatial, right, network of patchy sites. So each species, let's say, you have three traits. It's just a cartoon, like a biotic trait, abiotic trait, and a special trait, each with its own genetic architecture. And let's say we have 4 species here. And the point now is how to explore different integration scenarios to understand better biodiversity dynamics. This is just, right, to visualize that we can deal with intraspecific variants, right, for each trait, for many interacting populations, and we can essentially calculate fitness for each phenotype. Essentially, we can use the covariance matrix, that the omega, and we can also use the optima to the biotic or to the abiotic or to the special traits, and this optima can be static on dynamics, so you have at least 4 scenarios, right? Static trait dynamics or dynamic, and static or dynamic optimum scenario. So this is still, I think, pretty exploratory, but the main point here is you can try to understand biodiversity dynamics in multidimensional, right? traits space. We now just explore two scenarios, which we call the magic and the magic and modular scenario. So magic essentially when one trait, the biotic trait, dominates the dynamics of the fitness function. Here is just governed by the biotic trait, and in the modular scenario, each trait is completely independent. So you have these two scenarios, and sorry. And essentially, we explore Kubler-Ross selection for a given migration rate in the x-axis. In the y-axis, you have the mean species richness for a gradient of selection. And what you can see is when traits are completely independent, you have normally a species decay when interaction, biotic interaction is stronger, but it decays at the same rate, right, than the magic scenario. But in the magic, you are losing more species. Essentially, the idea here is when you have integrated, highly integrated phenotypes dominated by biotic interactions, you have more species, right, going to extinction than when you decouple, right, the biotic, abiotic, or dispersal traits from the dynamics. I think for people thinking in these problems, it's not something extraordinary, right, because it's more or less intuitive. But we are starting to deal now with more complex scenarios and see how biodiversity dynamics change under different integration gradients and also number of traits. Just to summarize, in the first part of the talk, we have been trying to work with a framework to understand how asymmetric trait preference might be driving fluctuating interaction selection in food webs. And you can have many species, right, pairwise interactions that are fluctuating, and the biotic traits governing the dynamics and stabilizing the food webs. We're in an exploration phase where we explore trait integration gradients on biodiversity dynamics. And for this preliminary analysis, we are showing that modular integration predicts more species than the magic scenario, where all traits are highly integrated. And finally, we are now in a pretty-risk project coupling the paleotropic matrix with different functions, from exploring like gradients from additive to non-additive dynamics to connect trait architecture and multi-trait biodiversity in dynamic fitness landscapes. Thank you, guys.
We have time for questions. So there's earlier talks of discussion of how things like mutation and variation involved. And here you're looking at how fluctuating through selection, what we can do maintain to stabilize the field on track. What do you think the next generation of diversity and
Did you get the question?
No.
No? Can you come here? Maybe it's better, right? It's a long question. Yes.